The World Cup international break is officially over. This was the last international break before the World Cup. We saw all the playoff games, we saw all these World Cup friendlies, and in today's video, I'm going to be telling you guys what are the 10 biggest things that we learned during this international break from 10 big countries. I'm not going to be talking about the teams that were competing in the playoffs. I'm gonna leave that for maybe a separate video, but in today's video we got to talk about these international friendlies because there were some really interesting results. So I'm going to be telling you guys 10 of the biggest things I noticed from 10 separate countries, and the first country that we need to start off with is England, because in my opinion in this international break England weren't good enough. It's simple as that. They weren't good enough. And what was the reason for this? In my opinion, I think England are heavily reliant on their best players, and I feel like this may not have been apparent in some of their other games that they played in the qualifiers, because in most qualifiers they play with their biggest players. But in games where they rotate their players, in that friendly earlier on against Senegal, in the friendlies in this international break against Uruguay, against Japan, where they're rotating their players, they're playing part of their main squad but also some of their B team players. Let's start off by looking at that first game against Uruguay, because for me, I think in this game England just weren't good on the attack. So Lenke wasn't good enough. Madueke obviously went off early, but he wasn't good enough. And they did get their goal from Ben White. But then you look at them in the last few minutes of the game and it was complete capitulation. Obviously, Ben White caused the penalty on Valverde. He scored the penalty. And even after the penalty goal for the last few minutes, Uruguay could have scored again. We could have saw a loss from England in this game, and that would have gone so horribly with their loss that they got the game after against Japan. I think I saw online that this was the first time that an Asian team has ever beaten England in England. So this is history for Japan. And once again, England in this game, in the attack, they just weren't good enough. Obviously, they rotated their players. We saw them start Morgan Rogers, Cole Palmer, and Gordon. But Phil Foden was still in the team, and he was pretty poor in both games. And this is a constant thing that we've noticed with Phil Foden, is in recent international breaks, in recent national team competitions, he doesn't perform. And this is something that England really need to work on. And even in the midfield, we saw them play with Anderson, Mainu. They started a lot of young players in this game, O'Reilly, but most of them didn't perform good. So I feel like this really begs the question, what is England's best lineup? And with players missing from their best lineup, if players get injured, if not all their players are available, will England still have a successful World Cup? Obviously, they're ranked 4th in the world by FIFA, which we do know now that these rankings are completely screwed up. But can England have a great tournament? Can England make it to the semifinals, to the final? Can they win it? In my opinion, these performances tell us that their depth may not be as good as we may have initially expected, but also that their B team is also not as good as we may have initially thought. Moving on to the next country, we got USA, one of the host nations, and I am going to be talking about another host nation as another country later on in the video. But for me, this was another very poor window from the US, and I feel like this was very unexpected, because if you look at the US in recent friendlies, they've been incredible. They've been really good. We saw them get that win against Japan. They drew against Ecuador, which everyone would expect, but then they beat Australia, they beat Paraguay, and then they got that incredible 5-1 win against Uruguay. That was an amazing game from US. So coming into these matches against Belgium, against Portugal, people had high hopes, especially with the home advantage. And in that game against Belgium, it started off good because US got the first goal, and it was a great goal by McKennie, one of their best performing players this season in the domestic league. But Belgium completely rinsed the floor with USA. They completely slapped them up, scored 5 goals. Bang, 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 bang. 5 goals against US. And US, obviously they replied with a late goal, but this showed us how US defensively are very poor. Yes, they may have good players in the attack. Tillman with Leverkusen is a great player. Pulisic is having a great season with Milan. Balogun is obviously a good player. McKennie, fantastic player with Juve. But defensively, there's so many issues with the US. Whether they're playing their main defensive lineup, whether they're playing a backup defensive lineup, there's so many issues defensively with this team. And once again, we saw that against Portugal. But in this game, their attack just wasn't on it at all. Their attack did not do good. They changed up the formation and it just didn't work out. It didn't work out. And this was against a Portuguese team who struggled in their previous match against Mexico in the friendlies. But in this match, we saw great things from Bruno Fernandes, Trincao. I still feel like Portugal do have a little bit of a striker problem because obviously Cristiano is getting old in age. And then some of their other younger strikers, like for example, Gonçalo Ramos, he's not consistent enough to be starting week in, week out for this Portugal team. But that's a discussion for another day. We're talking about the US, and in my opinion, I don't think they're as good as they're made out to seem. Obviously, they're ranked 15th in the world by FIFA. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. And I hear people saying they can make it to the semifinals in the World Cup, the quarterfinals in the World Cup. Moving on to the next country, we got Austria. And I think this was a very, very interesting one because Austria are ranked 24th in the world by FIFA. But I think they're much, much better than that. And in this international friendly, we saw particularly that first game against Ghana, that was incredible by Austria. And Ghana, yes, obviously they didn't make it to the last AFCON, but they're still a good team. They have some quality players, they have a quality attack. But for this Austrian team, only concede 1 goal against Ghana, but also to do so good in the attack. Gregoritsch was incredible in this game. Sabitzer, even though he may be starting to get up there in age, he's still running the midfield for Austria. And I feel like this told us a lot about their manager, Ralf Rangnick. I think Ralf Rangnick is an incredible, incredible manager. I think the way he gets his Austrian team to play is fantastic. I think they play some really, really good football. And even in that next game against South Korea are not a bad team whatsoever. But the way that Austria were still able to get the win, even after being somewhat on the back foot against South Korea, I thought this showed us a lot of resilience for this Austrian team. And going into the World Cup, they're in the same group as Algeria, Argentina, and Jordan. Jordan are a team that can score a lot of goals. Algeria, obviously, we saw them score 7 goals in one of their international games. And Argentina, we all know how good of a team Argentina is. So for Austria to show that against a lower quality team in Ghana, they can score many, many goals. But even against a very good team in South Korea, who may have been on the front foot for most of the game, Austria can defend well, defend very resolute, very compact. They can score and they can keep a clean sheet. And I think this was a very, very important game for Austria. And I think coming into this World Cup, they're definitely could possibly perform much higher than expectations. Moving into the 4th team, we got Cote d'Ivoire. And these games that Cote d'Ivoire played were very, very impressive to me. That first game against South Korea was incredible. Now, South Korea, on the other hand, they ended up losing both of their international friendly games. So it's pretty poor on them. But Ivory Coast in this game in particular were very, very good. Obviously, they're not playing at home. And for their team to have a performance like this is incredible. We saw their attacking 3 perform brilliantly in this game. Defensively, they were solid. And this is not their best team. This is not their best attack. This is not even their best midfield lineup. Defensively, it was a pretty solid Ivory Coast defensive line. But in the attack, they didn't play players like Yan Diomande, like Amad Diallo. There's so many incredible Ivorian attackers that they didn't use in this game. And for them to still score 4 goals is incredible. And I feel like in both of these games for Ivory Coast, keeping a clean sheet was very, very important. Because if you look at Ivory Coast in the qualifiers, they were great defensively, but in the attack, they weren't that good. Then you look at Ivory Coast in the AFCON, they were incredible in the attack, could score multiple goals every game, but defensively, they were conceding a lot. So if Ivory Coast can find that sweet spot where they can still score many goals on the attack, but also keep clean sheets on the defensive end, they could have a very, very impressive World Cup. Now, in this game against Scotland, once again, I still don't think they were starting their best attack, but defensively, they were starting a lot better players. Diomande was playing, Kasonu was playing, Singo was playing, Lafontaine. So this is a much stronger defensive lineup for Cote d'Ivoire. But I thought they were very, very good against a team like Scotland, who obviously we all know are already in the World Cup. Moving on to the 5th team, we got Brazil. And obviously Brazil had 2 very different performances in this international break. We saw them lose the first match against France, but then they went ahead and beat Croatia. Now Brazil at this current moment are still heavily rotating their squad. If you look at their team in this France game, obviously they were missing a few players due to injury, most notably in the defense. But with that being said, they were still rotating a lot of players. They were rotating in the midfield lineup, and defensively, this is probably the main area that Ancelotti needs to figure out what the best defensive lineup is for Brazil, who his best wing backs are, his best full backs, and obviously his best center backs are most likely Gabriel or Marquinhos or obviously Bremer. But it's mainly the fullbacks that we don't fully know with Brazil. But obviously they weren't starting their best lineup. France in this game were starting their best lineup. France were starting in an incredible lineup in this match. In my opinion, probably their best lineup. And first of all, this France team looks crazy. Like, it looks absolutely insane. But the fact that Brazil, even though France won the game, I thought Brazil were the better team. Yes, the possession stats say otherwise, but I think on the attack, Brazil were definitely the better team. They had many more attacks than France. But I feel like this also leads us to a slight problem with Brazil, and that is that they don't really have the clinical finishers that we've seen from some of these Brazilian teams in history. You look at Brazil when they had R9, such a clinical finisher. But this Brazil team now, they have great attackers. They have Mateus Cunha. They have Vinicius Jr. Obviously, they have Rodrigo, but he's not going to be playing. They also have some other underrated players like Igor Jesus, Thiago. Obviously, they also have João Pedro. So they have some very good attackers, but they don't have that clinical finishing ability that some of these Brazil teams from the past have had. But in the second game against Croatia, I thought this was a very good game from Brazil. They won 3-1. Obviously, in the stadium, there was a lot of Brazilian fans, so it was almost like a home game. And once again, they were rotating their lineup. I thought it was a little bit more of a solid attacking lineup, and the midfield as well. Defensively, once again, still rotating. They played with Pereira, Santos. They started with Ibanez on the right side instead of Wesley. Obviously, rotated the keeper as well. But I think this was a very good performance by Brazil. I feel like they took their chances better in this game. I feel like they still, once again, weren't the best at holding possession, but they still were able to get the result, and that's what's important for Brazil. So I feel like the way that they're going to have a good World Cup is if they can finish their chances, and if they fail to do so, they may disappoint. Moving on to the next country, we got France, and I'm gonna make this short and sweet. They played 2 games against 2 South American teams, Brazil and Colombia, and they destroyed Colombia in that second game. It was an absolute destruction. Colombia got completely destroyed in this game. And the stats show that France had more possession, but realistically, I think France probably could have scored at least 4 goals in this game, if not even more. And France didn't even start their best lineup. You saw a lineup from Colombia where we see Luis Diaz, we see Rodriguez, we see Luis Suarez, who sadly missed many chances in this international break, and also John Arias. Even with Lerma and Rios in the midfield, this is the best attack and midfield for Colombia. And France in this game are using their B team. They're playing with players like Aklius, players like Cherki, Doué, Thuram, players that don't have a lot of experience in the France national team. And for them to still have such a dominant performance. And when they put on some of their subs, and they put on players like Colomwani and Mbappe and Olise and Ekitike, they themselves could have gotten another 2 goals at least. Ekitike had 1 chance where he threw on goal, but the keeper ends up making a brilliant save, and Mbappe ends up scoring a goal, but obviously he was offside. So I think France in this international break just show us why they're probably the top 2 favorite team in the world, and I don't know if they're number 2. Moving on to the next nation, we got Japan. I think Japan had a very good international break. And you look at Japan in recent games, and they've actually been very good. After that poor result against USA, we saw them get a draw against Paraguay. Obviously, they beat Brazil at the end of last year and also got that 2-0 win against Ghana. And then more recently, we saw them also beat Bolivia. And then obviously in this international break, they got a 1-0 win against Scotland and a 1-0 win against England, both games being played away. I think these games are very important for Japan, because obviously this Japanese lineup is good. They still have Hueda in the attack. They have players like Ito. They have obviously Don, who's a very good player. Kamada is a very good player. Matoma, obviously one of the more experienced players, but still a fantastic player. But Japan are also going to be missing a few players in this World Cup due to injury. Obviously, we saw Minamino pick up an injury. We saw Wataru Endo get injured with Liverpool. So they are missing a decent amount of players. So for them to still get good results against England and against Scotland is very good for Japan. I think these results are really important. And heading into this World Cup, I think they could possibly make it out of the group and maybe even make it further than a lot of people expect. Moving into the 8th country, we got Mexico. And boys and girls, Mexico have definitely proved me wrong. In my World Cup ranking video, I personally didn't see that much going for Mexico. I didn't think, even though this tournament is partially going to be played in Mexico, I didn't think that they were going to have a good tournament, because I personally didn't like the look of their squad. I didn't like the way they were playing in some of their more recent games. But if you look at them now, I think this international friendly has just secured the fact that Mexico are probably favorites for Group A and could possibly make it a lot further than we expect. Obviously, if you look at their international games recently, they have not lost in 5 games, right? This stretch of games were really poor for Mexico, and over those games, over those few months, that's really what I was basing my ranking off for Mexico. Obviously, we saw them get a few decent results after that, and that 4-0 win against Iceland was very good. But because of all those poor results, I personally didn't really see it with Mexico. But in this international break against Portugal and against Belgium, now I know what you may be saying, 0-0 draw, 0-0, and a 1-1 draw. But these are very good results because Portugal and Belgium are both top 10 team in the world. And in this game against Portugal, Mexico probably could have won. Yes, Portugal had more possession, but they really didn't have any fantastic opportunities. They had 2 shots on target. Mexico were very good defensively, and Mexico arguably could have won this game. I think when Gonzalez came on, a few minutes after he came on in the 82nd, 83rd minute, he had a brilliant chance, could have scored and could have brought Mexico a 1-0 win against Portugal. Once again, Portugal in the midfield, they were okay. Gonzalo Ramos didn't really do that much. Conceição wasn't very good in this game, and João Felix obviously also didn't have the best game. But in terms of Mexico, players like Gutierrez and Jimenez, Fidalgo, yes, all of these players maybe didn't have their best performance, but we know that these players can play it. What's more unknown with Mexico is their midfield and their defense. And keeping a clean sheet against Portugal is very good. Their goalkeeper made a few good saves. And in that next game against Belgium, 1-1 draw, very good result from Mexico. Once again, defensively, they were solid. Still rotating some of the players in their team, but we saw more from their midfield in this game. Obviously, like I already mentioned, Gutierrez, Jimenez, Fidalgo, these players are players that can play across the front 3, and that's why we see them playing in multiple different positions. They can be rotated, but against a team in Belgium, and don't get it twisted, Belgium did not play their B team or their C team. They had players like Openda, De Bruyne, Tielemans. Obviously, they had De Winter, they had Luka Bacchio, who scored the goal. It was a great goal. But once again, Luka Bacchio was a good player. That goal that he scored against USA was brilliant. So I feel like Mexico in both of these games, yes, on paper, they're not good looking results because they're not wins. But when you take everything into account, when you take into account the teams that they were versing, when you take into account how they've been performing defensively in recent games, the fact that they've kept 4 clean sheets in a row and then kept Belgium to 1 goal and got a 1-1 draw is very impressive for Mexico. And I think Mexico could have definitely a pretty, almost like a dark horse run in this World Cup. Moving into the 9th team, we got Ecuador, and I'm gonna make this very short. Ecuador, we already knew what they were about, but I feel like these 2 games just completely confirmed what we thought about Ecuador. Ecuador are drawing merchants. If they could, they would draw every single game. Yes, they haven't lost in what is it, 16 games they haven't lost, but oh my gosh, the amount of draws in the qualification: draw against Chile, draw against Brazil, draw against Peru, draw against Paraguay, 4 draws in a row. Then they got a great win against Argentina, and since then, draw against USA, draw against Mexico, draw against Canada, and now in this friendly, draw against Morocco and draw against Netherlands. So they're literally drawing merchants. And in this World Cup, I wouldn't be surprised if they end all 3 games with 3 draws. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. Moving on to the last team, we got Colombia. And for me, I think Colombia may be one of the most disappointing international teams that we've seen within the last year or so. I don't think Colombia have been very good. You look at them in the qualification, towards the end of the qualification, they weren't very good. We saw them lose against Ecuador, lose against Brazil, get a few draws. Obviously, then they went on a run where they got a few good results. And this shows you that Colombia do have the goal scorers. They have John Arias, they have obviously James Rodriguez, they have Luis Suarez who can score goals, they have Luis Diaz. But with that being said, none of these players are top level goal scorers that can finish every chance they get, or that can finish majority of their chances. You look at Luis Suarez, especially in this game against Croatia, the fact that he didn't score is crazy. The fact that Luis Suarez did not score in this game is crazy. 2 big chances, they had many shots on target. They really should have got at least a draw from that game. And in this game against France, this was a game where Colombia didn't have many chances. They had only 4 total shots. They had only 1 shot on target. But defensively, they were not good enough. And like I already mentioned earlier, this was against France's B team. And players like Cabal, players like Mojica, players like Sanchez, Munoz, these are all very, very high quality players, but defensively, just not good enough in this game. Lerma and Richard Rios also didn't do enough on the defensive end as well. So Colombia heading into this World Cup, yes, they're a good team. Yes, in the CONMEBOL qualifiers, they were very, very good. They finished in 3rd place. But after some of these performances against the likes of Uzbekistan, DR Congo, and Portugal, I don't know where their wins are going to come. I don't see them beating Portugal. I don't even think they're going to be able to beat DR Congo. Against Uzbekistan, they may be able to get a result. But with that being said, that's not going to be enough for Colombia to make it out of the group stages. But that's the end of this video. I'm not going to be editing this video. This was just a nice talking point that I wanted to share with you guys about some of these nations during the last international break and during pretty much some of the last games that we see before the 2026 World Cup. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree with what I said about some of these nations. If you disagree, let me know your opinions. Obviously, I did end up going to one international friendly game, the Canada against Iceland game. I recorded it. We got a crazy video coming out within the next few days. And obviously, stay tuned for more videos if you've been enjoying the World Cup content. I am going to be doing a updated World Cup ranking where I will be ranking all the official 48 teams. But with that being said, that's the end of the video. If you guys did enjoy this video, remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more videos.